This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. If you click on the link in the description below, it'll take you to their store and they'll know I sent you there. Hello everyone, I'm Nitsahone, and it is Wednesday, so that means it's time for another MTG Top 10. Most of this series looks at Magic from a competitive viewpoint and rank cards or decks based on how well or badly they've performed over the years at Magic's highest level, but from time to time I like to do videos on other topics. This time around we're going to be looking at 10 Magic cards that reference the real world. This seems like an apt time to do this list, with Throne of Eldraine preview season well underway at this point. Throne of Eldraine is a set filled to the brim with references to both Grimm's fairy tales and to Arthurian legend, and more broadly, medieval romantic literature. That made me want to go back and look at cards from the past that have referenced the real world. This list includes cards that reference modern pop culture, historical figures, and fiction throughout world history. One of the fun things about this list for me is that I get to make use of my history PhD in talking about some of the cards. This list is not exhaustive. It is just 10 examples of this that I enjoy. An important caveat is that I didn't include things that are common fantasy creatures like golems, dragons, djinns, and the like that have their roots based in folklore from the real world and appear in all kinds of other fantasy franchises. While there are a couple of creature types on this list, they are more obscure ones that are certainly not the norm in fantasy. Alright, let's get to our list. At number 10, I basically have all of Arabian Nights. In Magic's early days, the lore hadn't really been worked out. There were lots of cards that referenced the real world, and Arabian Nights was an entire set based on the real world. In particular, it is based on the medieval Arabic collection of folktales, commonly called Arabian Nights, but more accurately called 1001 Nights. This collection of folktales contains stories like Aladdin and his lamp and Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves. The collection has a framed story that involves a woman named Shahrazad, who has recently married a very cruel king who marries a new wife every day, sleeps with her the night of their marriage, and has the woman executed the following morning. Shahrazad, though, manages to avoid this fate by telling him a new story every single night, and the stories she tells are so good that he avoids consummating the marriage or having her executed. Shahrazad's ability to stall is reflected very well on the card Shahrazad. There are countless other references in the set to real-world locations, literature, and historical figures from throughout the Arab world. At number 9, I have Grave Bramble. The source material for this card isn't quite as highbrow as 1001 Nights. Instead, it's a card that references modern pop culture, in particular, the Plants vs. Zombies series of games. In the game, which takes place during a zombie apocalypse, you protect your home from zombies by planting plants that can fight them off for you. Grave Bramble being a plant and having protection from zombies is no coincidence. At number 8, we return to real-world literature with Frankensteins Monster. This creature is a big part of our pop culture, and it goes all the way back to Mary Shelley's novel, Frankenstein, or the Modern Prometheus, which was first published in 1818. In it, she tells the tale of Dr. Frankenstein, who, through a series of experiments, creates a creature that the novel refers to as the Wretch, contrary to most depictions of the creature in pop culture, which give it the name Frankenstein. Anyway, this creature escapes and wanders around trying to understand the world that he has been brought into. The idea that the Wretch is made up of composite body parts is sort of hinted at in the novel, but that is generally how the creature is depicted in pop culture, so it makes sense that the monster here has a more stitched-together appearance. At number 7, I have Crib Swap. The whole changeling thing is based on medieval European folklore, and Crib Swap itself references a very specific aspect of that. If they hadn't already touched on changelings in the past, they would actually make perfect sense in Eldraine given the setting. Anyway, changelings were believed to steal human children and replace them with their own child, whose appearance was mostly human, though there were usually some strange aspects of their appearance. And as you can see, that's exactly what's happening with Crib Swap, well, except the stolen child was evidently a Kithkin, as there are no humans on Lorwyn. Interestingly, these days, we think these stories helped explain to people why their children were born with developmental disorders and the like. At number 6, I have both Amets from Almond Cat block. Almond Cat is, of course, Egypt-inspired, and as a result, there are lots of things in the set with a basis in ancient Egyptian religion, and that's what the Amets are. During the New Kingdom, the Egyptian afterlife involved a journey through the underworld until finally reaching a chamber where various gods would judge whether or not you were worthy for entrance into the afterlife. If you were judged unworthy, the Amet, a being who is part hippo, part lion, and part crocodile, all three very frightening animals that Egyptians would have had experience with, This scary creature would devour your heart and you would cease to exist. While the Amets and Almond Cat only have the crocodile creature type, you can clearly see in the art that they also happen to have the parts of a hippo and lion as well. Baleful Amet's flavor text also seems to indicate some sort of connection to the afterlife. At number 5, we have the Nephilim, and yes, that is the correct way to say that. Nephilim is Hebrew and literally means fallen ones. The term appears in a few places in the Hebrew Bible, with Genesis cryptically referring to them as the offspring of the sons of God and the daughters of men. Over the years, some Jewish traditions have maintained that they are the offsprings of fallen angels and humans, while others considered them to be giants that used to exist a long time ago. Now, admittedly, there aren't a lot of similarities between the biblical Nephilim and the ones in magic. The actual origins of the Nephilim in magic haven't really been fully explained as far as I'm aware, except that they are the old gods of the plane of Ravnica. I don't think we know their actual origin. However, I do think the use of the name Nephilim alone is interesting enough for it to be on this list. At number 4, I have Headless Horseman. Like Frankensteins Monster, this is a card that doesn't just reference some aspect of real-world pop culture, it is lifted directly from it. The Headless Horseman, of course, appears in Washington Irving's famous 1820 short story, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. In the story, a small town is terrorized by the apparently reanimated corpse of a Hessian mercenary who had fought during the Revolutionary War. Even the flavor text of this card references the source material. At number 3, we return to more modern pop culture with Delvar of Secrets, who seems to be largely based on Jeff Goldblum's character in the 1986 film The Fly. In it, he's a scientist who is trying to figure out teleportation, and he ends up deciding to experiment on himself, putting himself at risk. It seems that everything goes well, but a fly ends up in the teleporter when he does, and he slowly starts to mutate into something that is part fly and part man. With Delvar of Secrets, things do go a little differently. The experiment doesn't seem to have anything to do with teleportation for the Delvar, but it's still a scientist deciding to experiment upon themselves, and things going a little crazy in the end. And with both figures, in the end, they're transformed into a frightening-looking creature that is part insect and part human. At number 2, I have 2 cards from Theros Block, King Makar and Sip of Hemlock. Theros Block is based on classical Greece, and as a result, the set makes multiple references to Greek culture, history, and mythology, but these are the 2 examples I like the most. King Makar is a direct reference to the famous King Midas, who gains the ability to turn anything to gold that he touches, but his new ability turns out to be a curse too, because he can't touch his loved ones either without turning them into unliving golden statues. King Makar references that in the art and in his effect, although, you know that if you watched my video on the biggest flavor fails in Magic, that the design here really bothers me because the effect is optional. Makar should have to turn stuff to gold, whether he wants to or not. Anyway, meanwhile, Sip of Hemlock references a common way that people were executed in ancient Greece, a mode that is especially well known because it was used to execute the great philosopher Socrates, who was executed in 399 BCE for teaching young Athenian citizens things that went against typical Greek tradition. And at number 1, I have 2 cards, Gallantry and Repentant Vampire. These 2 reference recent pop culture, in particular, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the popular television show that ran from 1997 to 2003. This is more obvious on Repentant Vampire, who is clearly modeled after the character Angel, played by David Boreanaz, who appeared on Buffy and his own spin-off series. His hairstyle and clothing closely mirror him, and even the face of the Repentant Vampire really looks like the vamp face effect from the show. It doesn't just end with looking similar, though. The character of Angel is a repentant vampire, one who seeks to undo all the wrong he has done for hundreds of years. Meanwhile, Gallantry's art has a figure that looks a lot like Sarah Michelle Gellar's Buffy, who even seems to be wielding a stake as she fights. When you look closely at the art, you realize that the 2 of them are actually fighting together. The repentant vampire and the woman on Gallantry, and that was something that the 2 characters frequently did on Buffy the Vampire Slayer, fight off evil side by side. You can see, by the way, that the artist originally had her as a brunette, but further down the line she was clearly changed to a blonde so that the reference would be even more obvious. So yeah, this one is really cool to me because Buffy is probably my favorite TV show of all time. Well, that does it for this MTG Top 10. Did I leave out your favorite card that references the real world? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it and share it so that others can enjoy it too. If you want to make sure you catch future MTG Top 10s, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching.